Hi, I'm Scott. Welcome to Synth Stuff. Today we're going to be demonstrating a kind of a neat feature. We have a built-in compressor with sidechain on the Montage, Montage M, and the MODX, and I'm going to show you a cool way that you can use it in your studio or live performance. Coming up. A lot of the time when I do these, I'll sit down and I'll set up a whole performance in here and show you how I do it, but for this example, it doesn't really matter. Basically all you need to know is that I set up a drum patch and then I set up a bass patch here. Those are the two parts that I have set up in the synth, and then I did set up a very simple pattern sequence. Very simple. So what we're going to be doing is trying to get the bass sound away from the sequencer, because right now if I play the drums and then I play bass on top, the kick drum, which has a lot of low end energy, is just obliterating the bass. When you run that into a recording, or if you're doing it live, what's going to happen is you're going to end up with a compressor that takes all of that down, and your kick, the violence and the energy of the kick is just going to disappear, and your bass is going to turn into a thin replica of what it once was. Now, if you have separate outputs, for instance, if you had a drum machine, then you could use that, and the mixer, either in your DAW or in a live environment, can deal with that. And the way they would normally do that is with a sidechain compressor. However, the Montage M and the MODX have a sidechain compressor built in. So we can, for this type of situation, deal with this internally in the synth, and that way we don't have that problem if we're playing live or recording. Now, typically you're not going to be recording drums and bass at the same time. You record those separately and then deal with this in your DAW. But if you are doing that type of recording, or especially if you're playing live, then this is how you can go about doing that. So as you can see, my part 1 is drums and part 2 is synth. So what we want to do is go into synth and edit. And if we go into effects, if we look at routing, we're going to set up a multi-band compressor. And the reason for that is because we don't want to be compressing everything in there. We may want to leave some of the high energy, the high frequency sound of the bass behind. All we want to get rid of is the low end, because that's where all the energy is, especially from the kick drum. And we don't want to have the kick drum actually killing all the top end of our bass sound, because the bass sound does have, it has a little bit of a top end fizz to it, especially on the attack. So what we're going to do is going to go into the edit of that insert, and you'll notice we have two things set up. First, we have sidechain set up to point to part 1, and you can have a look, and what I've done is I've set up the mid and the high thresholds as high as they'll go. So basically they're not going to take any effect, and same thing, we can actually set the ratio to 1, so we know that the mid band and the high band of the multi-band compressor are going to do nothing at all. We want to know about the low band. So the low band I've picked about 54. I've got the gain of it pumped up a little bit to 11. The ratio I've put at maximum 20. I got a fairly quick attack at 16 with a release of 15. And I did put the dividing frequency between the low and the mid at 375. So this is how I've set up this compressor. Now this is just for this sound, for this demonstration. You're going to have to try and play with this if you're using a bass guitar or something that has different sounds, and you may want to have it act a little bit differently, but this is how I did it for this one. The last thing we need to do is tell it the sidechain level. This is how much of the part 1, you can see we're sidechaining from part 1, which is drums. How much of that sidechain level are we going to have feeding into the sidechain of this compressor? Right now it's set at infinite, or infinite negative, which is basically 0. So we're going to crank that up all the way to plus 24. I mean, you probably don't need plus 24, but that's what I'm going to use for this demonstration. You can adjust that again. So now, if I start playing the drums, you can hear the bass pulsating. And the reason that's pulsating like that is because every time we get a kick, it's actually sending that kick signal, actually it's sending all the drums, but what we're looking at is the kick, and it's sending that kick to the side chain of part 2, which is our bass, and every time it sees that kick energy come in there, it just clamps down on the compressor on there, and it kind of dips that. And so that's how we get that pumping, because every time we have a bang of that kick drum hitting, it's dropping the volume down on our bass just to fit where that kick drum is. And if you have a look, you can actually edit how quickly, if I adjust the release out, then it'll come back up slower, and we could actually put it down, put it down a little bit to 10 as a minimum, and we could all do the same thing with the attack. We could bring that down and it'll give it a little sharper one. So let's try to hear how that sounds. You can hear a much sharper cut. That's sidechaining on your Montage M, Montage and MODX. This is a real gentle introduction to this, but you can sidechain all the different compressors, and you can do it from this part. You could set up 2 different inserts if we wanted to. If we go back to routing here, so we could set up a second sidechain here, and see compressor, and say we want a classic compressor here, and then we can say sidechain from a different part. This may be part 3. And then you can go into that and change the attack and so on, and the sidechain level from that. And then if we had something else playing in part 3, it would also affect the compression on this individual part, and the bass part we have in part 2. I hope that makes some sense, and if that's of use to you, click like, subscribe to the channel. Any comments, questions, corrections, anything of that sort, leave them in the comments section below. Thanks for watching.